Most people think power looks loud. Presidents, billionaires, corporations with logos you recognize instantly. But real power doesn't shout. It designs systems. And once those systems are in place, you don't need force anymore. You just need participation. Every time you fill your gas tank, buy something online, take medication, search the internet, or swipe a card at the bank, you're participating in a system that was designed over 150 years ago by one man. His name was John D. Rockefeller. And whether you know it or not, you're living inside the world he built. In 1870, Rockefeller was a 31-year-old businessman in Cleveland, Ohio. At that point, he controlled just 4% of America's oil refining capacity. That doesn't sound impressive until you fast forward 10 years. By 1880, he controlled 90%. By 1904, his empire controlled over 90% of oil production, 85% of final sales, and dominated nearly every step between the ground and the consumer. This wasn't just success, it was total control. And when the government finally stepped in and broke his company apart in 1911, something unexpected happened. Rockefeller didn't lose his power, he multiplied it. Because Rockefeller didn't just build an oil company, he built a method, a blueprint, a system so efficient, so legally sophisticated, and so adaptable that it would become the foundation of modern corporate power. That system didn't die with Standard Oil. It evolved, it spread. And today, in 2026, it quietly governs nearly every major industry on Earth. To understand how this happened, you have to understand Rockefeller himself. John D. Rockefeller was born in 1839 in New York. His father was a traveling con man who sold fake cancer cures. His mother was a deeply religious Baptist who believed discipline and moral certainty were virtues above all else. That combination shaped Rockefeller in a way few people recognize. He was ruthless in business, but he genuinely believed his actions were morally justified. In his mind, chaos was sinful. Competition was waste. Order was divine. And if God had chosen him to organize industry more efficiently than anyone else, then monopoly wasn't evil. It was righteous. When oil was discovered in Pennsylvania in 1859, the country rushed in blindly. Thousands of people drilled wherever they could. Prices collapsed from overproduction, then skyrocketed from shortages. Fortunes appeared and vanished overnight. It was disorder, and Rockefeller hated disorder. While everyone else chased oil in the ground, he saw something smarter. Drilling was luck. Refining was control. Oil had to be refined into kerosene before it had value, and that process could be standardized, optimized, and dominated. In 1863, Rockefeller invested in his first refinery. Within 2 years, it became the largest in Cleveland. But Cleveland had dozens of refineries, all barely surviving, all competing on razor-thin margins. Most business owners would fight for customers. Rockefeller didn't. He fought for elimination. This is where the first pillar of his system emerged: vertical integration. Vertical integration means owning every step of the process. Rockefeller didn't just refine oil. He bought the barrel factories so he didn't have to buy barrels. He acquired tank cars and negotiated control over rail transport. He built storage warehouses. He controlled distribution. Every middleman who once made money off the oil industry was removed and replaced by Standard Oil. That meant Rockefeller could produce cheaper than anyone else, by a wide margin. Competitors were paying more for barrels, more for shipping, more for storage. Rockefeller wasn't just saving money. He was rewriting the cost structure of the entire industry. He could sell kerosene for less than his competitors' production costs and still profit. That wasn't efficiency alone. It was predatory by design. By 1870, he formalized his empire as the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. But even then, a 4% market share wasn't enough. That's when he activated the second pillar of the system: horizontal integration. This meant eliminating competitors entirely, not outcompeting them, absorbing or destroying them. In 1872, Rockefeller executed what historians now call the Cleveland Massacre. Over the course of 3 months, he approached nearly every refinery owner in the city. His offer was simple: sell to Standard Oil and walk away wealthy, or refuse and be crushed. Those who sold often kept management roles and walked away rich. Those who refused faced price wars so brutal they couldn't survive. Rockefeller dropped prices below cost, absorbed losses his competitors couldn't afford, and waited. One by one, they folded. By the end of that year, Rockefeller controlled 25 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. In just 3 months, his national refining control jumped from 4% to 25%. This wasn't an accident. This was the blueprint: offer acquisition. If refused, destroy economically. Then buy what remains. Over the next decade, Rockefeller repeated this process across the country. New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Everywhere the same pattern unfolded. Secret railroad rebates lowered his shipping costs while raising his competitors. Vertical integration kept his margins unbeatable. Price wars eliminated resistance. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of America's oil refining. It wasn't a company anymore. It was infrastructure. But Rockefeller understood something deeper than market dominance. He knew monopolies don't just face competition, they face law and public outrage. The public hated him. Journalists called him a tyrant. Politicians threatened regulation. Rockefeller needed insulation. And this is where his most important innovation emerged, the trust. In 1882, Rockefeller's lawyers created the Standard Oil Trust. On paper, the individual companies remained separate. In reality, their stock was controlled by a single trust run by Rockefeller and a small inner circle. This structure allowed him to legally control businesses across state lines while technically complying with existing laws. It also created something entirely new, a parent entity that owned companies without producing anything itself. This was the birth of the modern holding company. Every major corporation you know today descends from this idea. Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, Berkshire Hathaway. All are variations of Rockefeller's trust structure. He didn't just dominate oil, he rewrote corporate law itself. By the early 1900s, Rockefeller was the richest man on earth. Adjusted for inflation, his wealth peaked around $400 billion, more than any individual in modern history. But the system wasn't done evolving. Public pressure finally forced the government's hand. In 1911, the Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil broken into 34 separate companies. Most people think this is where Rockefeller lost. It's where the story actually gets darker. Because when Standard Oil was broken up, Rockefeller still owned shares in every single piece. And when those companies were unleashed to compete, their combined value skyrocketed. Rockefeller's wealth didn't shrink, it tripled. When Standard Oil was broken apart in 1911, the public believed justice had finally been served. 34 separate companies replaced one massive monopoly. Newspapers celebrated, politicians congratulated themselves. On the surface, it looked like the end of Rockefeller's control. But beneath the celebration, the system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, adapting. Rockefeller didn't lose ownership when Standard Oil was dismantled. He gained it in fragments. Each new company inherited the same advantages: dominant infrastructure, a regional control, and the same corporate DNA. And because these companies were now legally independent, they could innovate, expand, and eventually merge again. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Exxon, Standard Oil of New York became Mobil, Standard Oil of California became Chevron, Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco. Over the next century, most of these pieces quietly reassembled. Exxon merged with Mobil in 1999. Chevron absorbed multiple former Standard Oil descendants. BP acquired Amoco and others. The monopoly never truly died. It just changed its shape. This revealed the most important truth about Rockefeller's system. It doesn't rely on one company. It relies on structure. Break the company, and the structure survives. That's why the system didn't collapse in 1911. It spread. But oil wasn't Rockefeller's most lasting achievement. His real legacy was proving that control works better than chaos, and that once a system is embedded into law, finance, and regulation, it becomes self-perpetuating. Every industry that followed learned this lesson. Take Amazon. It didn't invent the Rockefeller system. It perfected it for the digital age. Amazon started as an online bookstore, just like Rockefeller started as a single refinery. Then it moved vertically. Warehouses, logistics, delivery trucks, payment systems, cloud infrastructure. Today, Amazon controls not just retail, but the invisible backbone of the internet itself. Amazon Web Services hosts competitors, governments, and global platforms, generating more profit than Amazon's retail business ever could. Rockefeller controlled refineries, railroads, and distribution. Amazon controls commerce, logistics, and digital infrastructure. Same logic, different century. Amazon also mastered horizontal consolidation. It buys competitors when it can. Whole Foods, Twitch, MGM, Ring, Zappos. When it can't buy them, it studies them. Third-party sellers on Amazon hand over their sales data. Amazon analyzes what works, creates its own versions, undercuts the original sellers, and promotes itself above them. This isn't innovation. It's a modern price war, legal, algorithmic, and devastating. Google follows the same playbook through structure rather than pricing. Alphabet is a holding company that owns Google Search, YouTube, DeepMind, Waymo, and dozens of others. Each subsidiary appears independent, but control flows upward. This structure shields the parent company from liability, simplifies tax strategies, and makes regulation nearly impossible. Regulators don't know whether to attack the parent or the branches. Rockefeller solved that problem in 1882. Big tech just copied it. Pharmaceutical companies learned a different lesson from Rockefeller: regulatory capture. Rockefeller understood that controlling markets wasn't enough. You had to shape the rules. He worked closely with politicians and regulators to set standards his competitors couldn't meet. Today's pharmaceutical giants do the same. They fund regulatory agencies through user fees. They lobby for patent extensions. They help write the regulations that govern them. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck. This isn't corruption in the shadows. It's institutionalized influence, refined over a century. Banking followed Rockefeller's model almost perfectly. J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup. These aren't single banks. They're holding companies. Each owns layers of subsidiaries that handle different functions. When regulations attempt to limit risk, banks simply shift it within the structure. After the 2008 financial crisis, lawmakers struggled with one basic question: which entity do you regulate, the parent or the subsidiaries? Rockefeller had already answered that question long before modern banking existed. And then there's philanthropy, the final piece of the system and the most misunderstood. In 1913, Rockefeller created the Rockefeller Foundation with the equivalent of billions of dollars. Publicly, this was generosity. Privately, it was strategic brilliance. The foundation allowed him to avoid massive estate taxes. It allowed him to decide which universities, research institutions, and medical schools received funding, and it transformed his public image. The same man once known as the most hated figure in America became a benevolent elder statesman. But the influence went deeper. The Rockefeller Foundation shaped modern medical education, prioritizing pharmaceutical treatment models over holistic approaches. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was documented policy. The medical system that emerged benefited pharmaceutical companies, many of which trace their roots back to Standard Oil's chemical divisions. Today, this model is everywhere. The Gates Foundation shapes global health policy. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative influences education and biomedical research. These organizations do real good, but they also consolidate influence, guide public priorities, and operate outside democratic accountability. Rockefeller invented the template. Modern billionaires scaled it. The Rockefeller family never disappeared. Their wealth, spread across trusts and foundations, continues to influence policy, research, and global finance. David Rockefeller, John D's grandson, spent decades at the center of international banking and geopolitical strategy. The system didn't just survive, it matured. And here's the part most people miss. The system isn't designed to be cruel, it's designed to be efficient. Standard Oil dramatically reduced the price of kerosene. Amazon delivers products faster and cheaper than anyone else. Google gives instant access to knowledge. Pharmaceutical companies create life-saving drugs. The system works. That's why it persists. The problem isn't efficiency. The problem is concentration. You don't really choose where you buy gasoline. Exxon, Chevron, BP, branches of the same tree. You don't truly choose where you shop online. Amazon's scale forces everyone else to adapt or die. You don't choose a search engine. Google controls over 90% of the market. You don't choose social media. Meta owns the ecosystem. You don't choose healthcare freely. It's filtered through licensing, insurance, and pharmaceutical dominance shaped by the Rockefeller system. Every year, the average person sends thousands of dollars into this structure. Over a lifetime, hundreds of thousands flow upward into consolidated corporate power. And escaping it isn't realistic. The system surrounds you. It's infrastructure, not an option. So what do? You can deny it and pretend the market is still free. You can resist it, supporting small businesses and antitrust reform, knowing it costs more and works slowly. Or you can understand it and position yourself accordingly. Rockefeller understood that systems reward ownership. He didn't just sell oil, he owned the system that sold it. This isn't moral advice, it's pattern recognition. Rockefeller once said, "Competition is a sin." He didn't mean it as arrogance, he meant it structurally. Competition duplicates effort. Consolidation eliminates waste. Monopoly, in his view, was the natural endpoint of efficiency. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter. The world was built on that belief. John D. Rockefeller died in 1937, but his system didn't die with him. It embedded itself into corporate law, tax policy, regulatory frameworks, and global finance. It became invisible, and that's its greatest strength. You don't live in a free market. You live in Rockefeller's world, and once you see it, you can never unsee it.